We have 13 weeks of pure excitement, pure learning, pure sharing, doing business together, bonding.
Idea extraction is your bedrock to building a profitable business.
Your business has a value, you have worth, and you need to be able to set your price. No matter how great the product is, it has to be marketed. If you have the cure for cancer tomorrow and you don't market it, no lives will be saved. Think about the challenges that we have and why your product or service is going to fill that.
You are the brand. We have to find our own unique value proposition.
At the end of the day, business is about money. And the big question you're always going to get, who is going to pay for this and how much money is it going to actually produce?
The only thing that you need to do is not give up.
This is going to be an exciting ride, ladies.
Key thing that I would say here, and the reason why I show this stat is that if you're feeling that way, you are not alone. Most people really are afraid to network. The key to anything is be prepared or prepare to fail, right? So you want to know your why. And I think that that also will help you with what I was talking about on the previous slide, is when you know why it is that you want to connect with another person or human, or why you're at an event, the why behind it should help you. It should help you be thoughtful about, who you want to meet, who is in your network, how do you want to meet them, and equally as important as who do you want to meet is equally as important as why you want to meet them. So really understanding the why is key and critical to your success. Think about the areas that you want to learn more about. Think about whose insight do you find valuable. Those are people that you definitely want to start to connect with in your network. What are you hoping to get out of the visit? So these are all questions that you want to do. Then the other thing you want to do before you step into any type of situation is do some research. I used to fall victim to just doing it on the fly. And I think it really depends on the situation. So I'm really talking about one where you're going in purposely knowing that you have to network. Research about, the space that you're going into, the company that, the event, something, because once you have a little bit, when you're more informed, you actually will gain a lot more confidence and comfort. And then last but not least, the elevator speech. So my elevator speech is really my identity statement. I often say, hi, my name is Nkechi Robinson. And for those of you, if you don't know, Nkechi means I am God's gift. And I know this to be true, that I am a gift to my husband. I'm a gift to my friends and my family. I'm a gift to those that are assigned to me universally. I am gifted to empower and to ignite people. And I create amazing experiences for myself and others. And this one with you is absolutely no different. So I'm going to that level of basic just to let you know that your elevator speech doesn't have to be, my name is Nkechi Robinson. I work at TD Bank and I'm an executive in technology and my team delivers all that. No, it could be actually about you and the presence that you are in this world, right? And then you want to know that elevator speech. You want it to just become, just really just be able to come out free forming with that level of confidence about knowing who you are. So practice your elevator speech. I don't think it should be any more than like 30 seconds at max. And it should be fire. The person should be really excited to know who you are and want to get to know more about you. And they should be a little bit flustered because they didn't have one prepared like that, like you did. So, and know that anyone that isn't attending this workshop is not going to be that prepared to have a good elevator speech like you can. So find an elevator speech and then really practice it and let it become just part of who you are when you introduce yourself. And next but not least, some of this has changed. I think it's very interesting. I think the way that we reach out in this virtual world is probably not really different than how we would have reached out in person. So I did keep one bullet in here that says in person, because you could still meet people in person 6 feet apart, obviously. But yeah, the reach out options in terms of when you have to network, I often get that. How do I reach out? Email, phone call, in person. If it's somebody new, have your elevator speech ready. You could talk about, you saw your profile online is a great way to approach somebody and say that, I'm really, really interested in learning this space a little bit more. And then use, I think I talk about it in another slide, and then use the tools that are available to us, right? Which is really social media, the various sites where it makes sense to reach out. But there's a number of different ways. Get creative with it. But I would say that it's really no different in the virtual world, and probably a lot easier in the virtual world than it was in person. The key, this, I have to add this in because I think I fall victim to this a lot. People reach out to me quite extensively, and I ask for grace because I don't necessarily see all my messages that come in. But more importantly, or less important is that a fact I don't respond. More important is the attitude that you choose when someone doesn't respond. And so I have learned just through my own life lived experience that a lot of times I get it wrong. When I presume I know why someone did not respond to me, I get it wrong 100% of the time. And so I've come to that space where I say it to myself, I coach and mentor people the same way. People, like, you should know that people should meet you. Like, that's how excited about your life that you should know that you're somebody that people want to meet. And so therefore, when somebody doesn't respond, it's not about you. You know what I mean? It's not because they don't want to talk to you. It's probably because of so many other reasons that don't have anything to do with you. And again, back to your why. If you have a very compelling why as to why you want to meet that person, then I'm sure that you're somebody that's going to get it done, no matter how. You'll reach out to them again. You'll connect to somebody who knows them to say, hey, can you drop a nugget? But if it's really somebody that you want to meet, before you get to a place where you're thinking that this person just doesn't want to respond to me, you're going to exhaust your options. And so I'm going to ask everyone as much as possible, when somebody doesn't reach back, know that you are important enough to be met with, so that that is not your default, that they just didn't want to get back in touch with you. Okay. So that's really big. You get the choice, it's up to you to choose the attitude that you want to have when you're in that situation. I'll give you a really, really quick example as to how I've fallen victim to that. So I spoke at an event. I think it was a networking event, actually. And this young lady decided that she was going to use the tangible tips that I'm sharing with you like today and reach out to me. And she did. And this happened in April. And July, I happened to be going through some old emails, and I see this email from her, and she's like, and in the email it talks about, she had sent me two since then. And in the email, it talked about how she, attended my workshop, and she wanted to put to practice a lot of the things I said. And she's really excited to meet with me. And, would I be willing to entertain her in a coffee chat? And in July, I responded back to her and I said, I'm going to ask for grace, because I am honestly opening up your email for the first time. I would love to meet you. Can we meet? And it was in that meeting, and I didn't have this when someone doesn't respond. It's because of her that I inserted it. She said to me, I had thought we'd made a great connection at the event. And then when you didn't respond, I started thinking that it was just on my end. And then maybe I wasn't good enough. And then, you're this executive, and maybe like all of these things, when in reality, she got me on a day after an event. And after any event, and I say this humbly, when I speak, I tend to get an influx of emails. And so I honestly, I could not respond to that influx. And I just continued to move forward with, sort of new email that was coming in from my workplace. And so, we had a really great dialogue that day. And then I realized that, she's not alone on that. And it's because of her that I inserted this into the slide. And then she's told me that the day that I did respond, she got lit up again. And I just really encouraged her that she should always be lit up, not because I didn't respond, but because she's just worthy of being lit up. So I digress a little, but just know who you are and know that you're worth responding to. Okay. Next but not least, you need to get uber great at asking good questions. Okay. I literally started a podcast so that I can get really great at interviewing people, like literally. And these are all of the questions that you want to write these down if you can. Who, what, when, how, where, why. And my favorite one says, tell me more, but I love what else. There's nothing better. And this is even great when you're in a like even a mentoring situation or a conversation with like the hubby and it's not going too well, that what else? It's like, what else? And then let the person keep going. And what else? Woo, tell me more. And let them exhaust everything that they have to say. And then you can continue to answer, you continue to either ask them questions or go into response. But it's a great way to know that you're not monopolizing the experience. It's a great way to show your curiosity and your desire to get to know them better. And so always think about 3 to 4 open-ended questions. Don't be afraid to write them down if you need to. And one of the things I typically will do is who, what, and when are typically 3 questions that I have ready for almost every networking experience. And a lot of times it's just, the opening question is the who, and then, oh my gosh, what was it about? And then, and when did that happen? And you'd be surprised if you can get up to 5. By the time you get to 5 questions, it is a proven fact that you will have created a connection with that person. And so remember, you're asking all of these questions with the objective to create a connection and have a very meaningful, open conversation with another human, one or multiple humans. Okay, so these are really important. Either take a screenshot, write them down, but capture these open-ended questions, and especially write down what else or tell me more. It's a killer one. Okay, I do this all the time, especially as I'm getting older. But I do take notes. And one of the reasons I love taking notes is because depending on what the situation is and whatnot, it enables me to really pay attention, listen, not yet ingest. Because I find sometimes if I'm ingesting and trying to listen, it's just too much, neural activity happening. So the writing actually helps me just to have the information in front of me to be able to use and then inform the rest of the conversation. But I do try to take notes and make notes leading up and during the conversation. But I use it also to keep account of what we spoke about so that when I follow up, because follow up is also important, I have something that I can refer back to say, hey, okay, that's what they said. And then it helps me even just type the email, and it provides a really good fulsome recount of, what we met. It also gives me an opportunity, weeks later, when I want to follow up with them, to go back and look, oh my God, they were on vacation. Let me open this up with, how was your vacation, right? So, so make good notes. Next, we're going to talk about building and maintaining relationships. A little bit of a pet peeve for me is when people come and just suck a lot of information out of me and I never hear from them again until they need information again, right? So, there's nothing better than cultivating relationships. I think that that's really important. And one of the things I would, say, and maybe I'll say it here, is, the better you can become to cultivate relationships, I think what you'll find is you are going to become a network for a network. If you understand what that means, you'll become almost what I call a super connector, right? And so the better the relationships that you have, the easier it is for you to reach back into that network to connect somebody else to that network, And I think ultimately that's what we want to do in life, especially as Black people. We want to be able to have such a diverse, expansive, huge network that is really not necessarily for you, but for others that are connected to you to be able to thrive from, So really focus on cultivating that relationship and building meaningful relationships, because there's nothing better than somebody says, you know what, man, I'm looking for a job, and I'm like, you know what, hold on. I have somebody, no guarantees, but would love to connect you with this person. You reach out to that person. They're like, oh my God, if it's coming from you, send them my way. Bypass, HR, So really build and maintain your relationships. I think that is really key. And I'm not talking about stalking people, but I am talking about, back to that, referring back to your notes, asking great questions when you did. That's why I never go into a networking relationship sterile. Never. Like today, I had a meeting with a senior vice president, and the last time we spoke, his family had just bought a dog. And I'm not a dog person, but they're dog people. And so I asked them, and he was very proud of his dog. And so I asked him to send me a little video because he says, we spent all weekend doing videos with the dog. I said, send me a video. Let me just tell you how cute this dog is. Like the dog is so cute. And so today I said, oh my gosh, how's your dog? And then we had a whole conversation about, the dog is like a real baby, like they can't be left alone. But, it eased up the rest of the conversation. And then we had some serious project work to talk about, and ended up the conversation on a high note. But it's like, you never know when somebody's like in their head, they're like, man, she remembered my dog, And so just start to really keep account of the people that you're meeting, cultivate the relationship, take your notes, guard them, and continue to become a super connector. Okay. And so you stay in touch. These are ways to just continue to build, is either through emails, frequent contact. I often use messaging, like especially if you work in a corporate environment. There's a lot of people that I network with, and every so often I'll just drop them a note. Hey, you came into my mind, thinking of you, just want to say hi. Don't need, and the best thing is cultivate a network where most of the time you're not asking for anything. It's just, hey, thinking of you, came into my mind, reached out. Follow them on their social media platforms to support whatever it is that they're doing. Like if they're speakers or if they're running programs or this and the other, you can use that as an opportunity to connect too. Say, hey, like what you're doing, keep going, that kind of stuff. And then the other key thing is a great thing to always do in every relationship. Like this is a game changer. Start doing this today. Every person you meet, where it makes sense, ask them, who do you recommend from your network I should speak with? And sometimes they'll say, do you need me to connect them? And a lot of times I just say, no, I am good with meeting people out of the gate, so that's okay. Just give me a name and I might plug you. But always try to get a name out of every experience that you have with somebody else. Like who's somebody else in your space that I should meet with? It's a great ending question. And then in terms of networking etiquette, I think in the virtual world, the one thing I will say to you is come on camera, as much as possible. I know that we are experiencing virtual fatigue, but I'm going to encourage everybody, especially if you work in a corporate environment, to come on camera a lot more. I personally believe that when you're not on camera, it's very easy to be forgotten. And in a world where we do not need to be forgotten, I think it's good to be visible. So that's one. Two, the other thing I will say to you, especially in the network world, it is human nature. Our desire as humans is to be seen. So imagine that. Our desire as human nature of humans is to be seen, to be enough, for people to see. Right. And so in the virtual world, people are hiding behind their screen and then feeling fatigued, feeling mental disruption and this and the other. And I'm like, well, no kidding. Like people are not being seen anymore. So as much as you think you're not wanting to come on camera, there is something about being seen that you don't realize feeds your psyche, feeds your spirit. So encourage that very much so in this virtual world. But, I think other than that on here, I have keep it positive. I think there's so much power in positivity. I bought shares on that stuff. Positivity is it. That's my default setting. Listen more than you talk, so really get into those, who, what, why, where, when, what else. Avoid jargons, put your phone away, be uber present, and be genuine. The best way, in my opinion, to be genuine is make sure that anytime you're in a networking, especially in this virtual world, I do this a lot. I make sure that my feet are firmly on the ground and I can feel the ground beneath my feet. That's when I know that my mind, my body, my soul are all in the experience. When my feet are cross-legged and I can't even, feel my feet on the ground, my mind starts to drift or this, that, and the other. So, the best way for me to find your most genuine self is when you're firmly planted, you can feel the ground beneath your feet, you're being held up, and mind, body, spirit, all in the same place. the best of you shows up. And then last but not, I think this is last but not least, I'm going to challenge everybody, right? So this is where you start to use this circle of value. Okay. There's like, aside from me, there's 87 people. Okay. There's valuable commodity here, you know? So get out there and meet more people. And remember, as exhausting as it may feel, there's a purpose behind it. The more people you meet, the ease of navigating life, situations, circumstances, because you just know that you have a network that's expansive enough that in time of need, there's somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who can help you, you know? And so I just challenge you, you know, maybe every month to people you don't know well, learn a couple of things about them, start to cultivate that relationship. And then the following month, 2 new people, you know, so that's 24 people in a year's time, you know, so really consider it and give it a shot. And I believe I have left time for some Q&A. So Uju, I'm going to pass it back to you and I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh my God, thank you so much. This has been very, very deep. Like I was taking note, there are a lot of things that I resonated with, but very key. And we have a couple of questions, but because I'm moderator, I have the right to ask my question first. Now forgive me. But I resonated with a lot of things that you mentioned, especially that, you know, I'm just gonna say that part where you said you have to really choose your attitude, especially when you get a no or you get you don't get a response. And I don't know if you remember, and you probably haven't checked, but a couple of months ago, I did reach out on LinkedIn and I was like, and I was like, I think I reached out twice. I was like, I know she's AVP, she's so busy. So I understand, you know, and then full circle, we're inviting you to come. And I just, you know, imagine if I had chosen a different attitude and I would have deprived myself of this experience, you know, experiencing you in this form. So I really hope that everybody took that away, and especially, you know, being present. And when you talked about being present and putting your camera on, I saw Farley shaking very, very vigorously because that's something he champions all the time. Like when I get a meeting, he's like, "Where's your camera?" So that's very, very helpful. My question is around, and you did mention that, okay, being an introvert or extrovert shouldn't be an excuse. My question is around people who are really coming into their own and really just understanding, especially around self-confidence and the issue of vulnerability. People don't want to be seen in their full self because you just feel like a stranger would see some part of them that they don't want to be seen. So that issue of vulnerability and building self-confidence, what would you say to someone who's still in that space, just so that they can come and show their full self when they're networking?
Yeah, I mean, we only have a few minutes. I can go deep into that. I do a whole workshop on confidence. But let me just say this. Confidence to me, like this is Nkechi's wisdom. It's a personal thing. Yeah. Your confidence, Uju, is your confidence. Mine is mine. Farley's is Farley's. Julian's is Julian's. And here's the thing. When people tell you, "Oh my God, you are so confident. I love your confidence. I see you out there. You look so confident." And a lot of times you're thinking back to that experience and you're thinking, shoot, I was shaking in my pants, my underarms were sweating. And all it is people seeing you in action. Mm-hmm. And so the simplest thing I can say to anyone is stay in action. Just don't give up on yourself. It will everything about who you are and what you need to know about yourself and that strength that you think is in a destination place then versus it's actually already inside of you is going to catch up to it's going to start to feel like your reality over time. Just don't stop, because you in action looks like confidence to somebody else. That is what I have firmly come to believe. When you're not moving, people are not going to say, "Oh, you're so confident." They're going to say you're not moving, right? So as much as, and like I said, we don't have a lot of time, but it's so incumbent on us to really embrace everything about us. Our most vulnerable self is our most authentic self. Honestly,
Mm.
There's no armor. There's nothing you have to put on. There's nothing you need to defend, nothing you need to protect, nothing you need to hide. That's just who you are. And I always say, if people can't hang, let them go.
Mm.
Your opinion of me is none of my business. I am doing my life. And if you can really embrace that, then that's just how you just need to show up in that true authenticity.
That's very key. Just showing up and owning your authenticity. Thank
Just
you so much.
own it in that moment. I've had experiences where I started to cry. Like that's just what the moment called for. You know what? Tissue was given to me. I wiped my eyes. Conversation continues. I walked out of there with more strength than I had going in, right? So it's you have to just get to that place where, like, when do we just embrace everything that we are in this moment?
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of questions.
Oh,
pouring in.
sorry.
I know
Okay.
that we have a few minutes. I'm just going to get to one or two of them.
Yeah.
So this question is from Rosane, and I'm picking this question because a lot of people resonate with it. And she says something about it's hard to put video on in these meetings because she's parenting and she's in the middle of dinner when some of these meetings happen, especially with the realities of working from home and all that. How would you advise to approach that, especially as, you know, we want to show up and not be forgotten?
Yeah. So I know, okay. So first of all, if your camera has to be off for whatever reason, understand, just don't let it be the majority of the reason, and you know your why. So if you can stand with integrity behind your why it's off, then it should be off. You get what I'm saying? But if it's off for reasons that, you know, I don't want to be seen, I don't feel like dressing up today, like those are things that I'm not trying to be harsh, but you got to check that. Right. The other thing I will say to you, I mean, today I was talking with somebody, their dog literally came here and they're like, are you really wanting to kiss me right now? And then they pushed it yesterday we had an early morning call. It had to be early morning. This woman was holding the cutest daughter. Her daughter's so cute. And I'm finding this is the time where everyone is so empathetic about what everyone is going through. So there's never been a time where that is not okay than it is now, right? And so that's all I would say is, like, just know that you are going to get support for whatever situation you're having going through. If you're turning off your camera for anything outside of that, then I would just say, just it's the heart, just check the heart.
Mm-hmm. So we just take two more questions.
Yeah.
There we go. This is from Karen. She says, how do you handle unsolicited LinkedIn requests from people whom you haven't had any virtual or physical connection with, particularly when they don't include a note or a reason for connecting?
So you're asking somebody whom, so I mean, there's a lot of connections I just accept. I think I accept, I'm more intentional about who I connect myself to. But if people connect to me, I figure, you know what, they need some inspiration. Connect, you know, but I don't necessarily follow back because I know nothing about them, right? But if I can answer your question, I sometimes use it as a coachable moment. Like when people say, hi, my name is blah, 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 and I know that you're an executive at TD and I'm looking for a job, I usually say, you know, I'd love to help you. But what I would suggest first is that there needs to be some type of understanding of each other, you know? So maybe, and if I can connect you with somebody who's in that space and talent, and maybe you could talk to them. If it's somebody that I am interested in, like it's maybe a Black woman in tech, I'm a big supporter of Black women in tech. I'd be like, let's set up a coffee chat first. And then let me just see how I can position myself or whom I'm positioned with that can help you. And that is so important. I can't believe I didn't say this. Be positioned, okay? When it comes to networking, not only, and I know we talked about like, who do you want to network with, but it's also important, you know, why you're in people's network. You have to know how you're positioned in the lives of other people. So for example, I'm here today, I say this kind of confidently because Nadine and her organization feel pretty good about me. You know what I mean?
We love you. We love you.
Okay. Right. So don't just go through life just saying, oh, I have this person, not understanding why you're in their network. So know who's positioned in yours and know why you're positioned in people's networks as well. Okay.
Awesome. I'm taking that away. Definitely. We have one last question, and that's from Mege or Meje. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name properly.
Yeah,
Not
it's
sure.
okay. It's Maggie. Thank you so
Maggie.
much. I find the conversation very intriguing. My question is about who to include in your network. Do you include people who are outside for your profession, or just expand your profession? For example, I am a social worker. Should I be including people in that field, or expand externally to other professions? Thank you.
Yeah. So 100%. First of all, it's prime for you to know people within your network. But here's what I would say: your network needs to be 360 degrees. Like, you need to know people at senior levels in different areas of industries. You need to know people that are across at your peer level. You need to know, some analysts and folks that you can also bring up, or you know what I mean, that can help you get some work done. So I would say nobody's really off limits, and really and truly, your networking is not just about the work that you do. It's also going to support I say there's two things. I always say what I'm made for and what I'm paid for. So I have a job that TD pays me for, but then there's a life that I'm made for, like my calling. And that is just more expansive. And as a result of that, it can't be restricted and limited, right? So I need to know graphic designers. I need to know entertainers. I need to know events people. I need to know, so nobody's off limits in my opinion, but that's just me. I know it can feel like it's exhausting, and I'm not telling you go now try and meet somebody everywhere. There's also an organic element to networking. As you meet people, other opportunities open up, and suddenly you're blossoming because you're opening yourself up to be a connector and to be connected. Okay, does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Amazing. I wish we could keep you here all night, but I know that you're pressed for time. So I'm just going to say a very huge thank you to really just stopping by, really blessing us and just adding so much value. We've taken so much. I have taken so many notes. I know the ladies on the call have as well. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope that we could get you back another time.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure. Love sharing energy with everybody. Go out there and be a super connector. Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a lovely
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you.
All right. This was great, right? Love it. Yeah, I can see all the notes in the chat. So thank you guys for engaging. And just to stay on time, we do have another fantastic speaker that is, just waiting to get on and share so much value with us. His name is Farley Flex. He's the co-founder of Urban Res Solutions. He's a media consultant, music promoter, artist manager, and motivational speaker. He's an educational consultant, change management specialist, leader, and public speaker. He's also a champion for diversity and inclusion. And like I mentioned, the co-founder of Urban Res Solutions, which is a social enterprise. He's also known for being a judge on the reality television series Canadian Idol. So please welcome to our boss woman stage, Farley Flex.
Thank you very much, Uju, and thank you to the BVPA. That was a dynamic performance by my sister. She always brings it in a real way. So all the props and all the respect to Nkechi's energy and power, literally. And we're going to talk about power. We're going to talk about it in the face of influence and vice versa. Just a quick overview of what we'll be discussing is influence and what exactly it is, how to amass influence versus power, as I said, and influence and networking. So they are cousins, by the way. They're not mutually exclusive in any way, shape, or form. So we'll definitely discuss that. And I'm hoping everyone's having a healthy time in their lives. And I want to make sure all your energies and minds are clear as to what you're absorbing. As Nkechi said, it's very important to be open to absorb and apply what you've absorbed. That's the number one thing. And we'll get to a little bit of that as well. So influence itself, and what is it? Now, a lot of people will misconstrue influence with power, right? And I want to ensure we delineate that to the best of our ability before we get started, so that everyone has a sense of what that actually means. it can be taken on, in many different ways, but it's taken on a whole new meaning now with social media. Like when you talk to young people, they'll say there are people who are making millions as an influencer. It's now a profession, right? From a YouTube, social media, you name it standpoint, individuals who are using the internet as a platform to be seen, as was also mentioned earlier. So we have to be mindful of what that means. And I really appreciated the comments around being visible. It's one of the things, as Uju mentioned, I'm adamant about the importance of being remembered. And when you think about it, influence and memorability, how much do people remember you from having interacted with you? And we'll talk about how to amass that and to really nurture it and curate it, quite frankly, to the best of your abilities. Nowadays, for adults, I would say LinkedIn is still a measure of influence based on the amount of connections someone has. People are going to look and see how connected that person is and determine how influential they are based on that. But there are some more, I guess you could say, grassroots and really fundamental aspects of how to amass influence. And that's what we're going to talk about first and foremost. And the really important thing to understand and appreciate is that influence, like knowledge, if it's not applied, right, it loses value. So, you could have somebody who is, extremely pedantic. They've amassed all this knowledge, PhDs, you name it. But if it's not applied, where's the value, right? So what we have to say to ourselves is, okay, I've amassed this amount of intellectual capacity and so forth. How do I apply it to my end goal? What is my end goal? Same thing with influence, right? When we talk about influence, we're talking about, it's more of a breeze that's blowing a tree gently. It's like it sways opinion, it sways perspective, it sways intentions, and as opposed to commanding them. So that's a distinction right there between influence and power. When people apply their power, right, they're exercising a measure of difference from a hierarchical standpoint, right? But when we talk about influence, it's almost like, if you're familiar with the term osmosis, it's that flowing of from one space to another. And the spaces we're talking about are people's opinions, people's perspectives, as I said, people's decision-making. When you have a mentor, for instance, and it's someone who has influence over the way you think, then you'll find that you're replicating the things that you've absorbed from them that you appreciate and think will be applicable to your end goal. So we always want to ensure that as we amass influence, that the reason or the justification, if you will, for being a person of influence comes from certain criteria. It comes from attributes like integrity, reliability, honesty, trustworthiness, actions, and I'm going to speak about actions in reflection to what was shared earlier as well, work ethic, consistency, results, professional and personal endorsements. Okay, so let's start first and foremost with integrity. So when we think about integrity, what comes to mind is work ethic. What comes to mind would be honesty. What comes to mind is having a certain measure of empathy. So you have the other folks that are in your circle of influence or circle of social interaction, right? Value your consistency of those attributes that you actually have and demonstrate. Okay, so when we talk about, again, having something without demonstration doesn't really bring value to the space you're in. It doesn't transmit in the form of energy because it's suffocated within. One of the things we share in our workshops is that nobody was born shy. Shyness is a learned behavior. You cannot be born shy. If you were born shy, you wouldn't have nursed on your mother. You would not have messed your diaper. You would not have cried when you were hungry, et cetera, et cetera. So shyness is a learned behavior. And a lot of times folks don't understand why they are shy. But if you look at the family dynamic, you can sometimes detect it based on the circle of people that are around that young person. So for instance, in my family, I can't even think of a shy person in my family, largely because of the way we were parented. We were parented in a very inclusive context. So when my mom was having conversations with friends and so forth, we would be introduced to share our opinion on certain things. My older cousins, who growing up were roughly 4 to 6 years older than me in terms of the gap, and they would ask my opinion about certain things. So they made me feel validated in my presence. If you're constantly ignored, and we have to really be mindful of this in our some of us are Caribbean heritage. I can't speak necessarily for continental African parenting, but I do know from a Caribbean standpoint, it's like big people conversation. You're not a part of this. This kind of dismissal of intellectual contribution, right? As opposed to ingratiating and embracing the knowledge of our youth into conversations, because that gives them the platform for confidence. Right? That confidence and that appreciation for what they're sharing relative to the overall conversation is going to evolve into a certain presence and a certain level of involvement into what's going on in their own surroundings. And that's what's going to lead to the confidence that was described earlier. So we have to be sure that when we see ourselves as someone who would like to be more influential, it comes from a participatory standpoint. You have to participate. If you're on a Zoom call, again, some of this is going to sound like it's repetitive, but I want to emphasize the important things. If I see you, how memorable are you going to be to me? If you don't see me, how memorable am I going to be to you? So we have to, when we prepare for these opportunities, I'm not sure how frequently, Uju, how frequently does Boss Women happen? Is it weekly? Okay.
Every Tuesday.
So every Tuesday. So, and this is with respect to the comment that was made earlier, and I say it respectfully, that if Boss Women is of value to you and you have a consistent family matter that happens on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., right? The idea is you do what we call a cost benefit analysis. How valuable is the Boss Women experience to me? My family is with me every day. I feed my family every day. I see them every day. Is it possible, based on that realm of influence that you have within your household, to adjust that family time to accommodate the value that's only available to you once a week? It's a cost-benefit analysis, right? Generally speaking, your family wants the best for you. You want the best for your family. So if being involved in Boss Women and experiencing it on a consistent basis is embellishing who you are, from a knowledge standpoint, from a confidence standpoint, from a collection of information standpoint, then you don't necessarily want to miss that experience. And of course, I believe the sessions are recorded, right? But ideally, in the moment, the energy that you just saw in the previous presentation, right, is there in real time for you to absorb and ignite your desire and your passion to be better in any capacity that you choose or recognize that you need to be. So that speaks to integrity as the important aspect of who you are. We talk about reliability. How much can people depend on you for a consistent opinion and perspective on the things that matter to the two of you that you have in common? Okay, so again, this still remains in the cousinship of networking, right? People network with those who will continually network with those who bring continual benefit, right, to the relationship. So 1 + 1 should equal more than 2. That's a distinction between just having an acquaintance and a friend, or just having a colleague and somebody that you actually want to do business with and grow with in a symbiotic kind of way. Then we have honesty, right? Honesty obviously is relatable to reliability and certainly to integrity as well. But honesty, when people come to you for, Farley, let me get your honest opinion, that defines the fact that you're an influencer or a person of influence. Okay, let's ask Farley, let's ask Rod, let's ask Uju, let's ask Nadine, right? Once you have that type of network of people who see you as the go-to person in any particular category, that is your trigger to recognize that you have some measure of influence. And that's what you nurture, and you develop it and you grow it. It's like a little seed planted in the garden of influence, if you will. Okay, trustworthiness. People want to be able to not just trust you as a human being, but trust your opinion by default, based on what you've demonstrated as an individual. You want to ensure that when people ask for your opinion, they can then take that as if it's their own opinion and apply it to whatever circumstance it is it needs to be applied to. Okay, so being trustworthy, that you have both the knowledge as well as the willingness to share it, so that other people can be embellished by just having knowing you, but just having known you, sorry. So once they know you and you become their go-to person in any particular category and they can trust your opinion, right? This is another key indicator that you have some measure of influence in any particular social circle or business circle that you may be in. And I'm going to include your household as well, right? It's important that because this is where most of us are developed and built ideally into the people that we become, right? So it doesn't start, you don't start to become influential or have the capacity to be influential at a certain stage in terms of what you've amassed in terms of degrees or job titles and so on and so forth. That starts for the time you're being nurtured in the family and you're making family decisions and you have some aspect of input that you're contributing to conversations, whether it be what should I do for my birthday, or what should we do on the weekend or on our day off, et cetera, et cetera. You want to be part of the narrative always. My business partner, Rod, always says the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? It's a similar thing to that. Participate, right? You don't have to dominate, but you have to participate. Then it comes to your actions. How you demonstrating who you are, so that people can say, you know what, I don't know him, but every time I see him, he's got a smile on his face and people are around him enjoying what he has to share. You know, years ago, I was speaking at George Brown, and it was a morning session, and the person who engaged me for the speaking engagement brought me in. I got there like 8 a.m., and most of the staff and faculty were there. And as I walked through to the table, the designated table that I was supposed to go to, there was a table that just seemed a little more rambunctious and fun-loving than the rest of the room on average. So it caught my attention, number one. I paid attention to it and looked at the different people who were contributing to the joy that was happening at that singular table. And I noticed this one particular lady who seemed to be the center of attention. So as I got up to speak, I said, before I start my presentation, I'd like to ask a question. And I pointed at that table. I said, you folks over there, what was all the noise when I was coming in? I heard laughter, I heard joy. Who's the influencer, or who's causing this exuberance at this particular table? It's 8:03 in the morning, and you guys are acting like it's 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. And I had already identified the person that I observed, and they all looked at this one woman. And then I said to the person that engaged me, I said, can I ask you a question? Let's call her Uju. If Uju did not work with the faculty here at George Brown, what would be the difference in this particular group of people? And she stood up proudly. This is the woman who hired me. She stood up proudly and said, Farley, and she actually got emotional. She said, Farley, I can tell you right now, if Uju wasn't here, half these people would not be either. She's an influencer, but guess what? Had nothing to do with hierarchy, had nothing to do with job title. She worked in the registrar's office. She was the first line of contact for students who were coming in to get their paperwork in order, their courses aligned, et cetera, pay their tuition fees and so forth. But she just had that aura, that energy, that personality, that welcoming spirit that made people found themselves drawn to her, and she had a great sense of humor on top of that. So think about this is not something you can buy at the corner store. This is a behavioral change. And you know, one of our formulas in transformative change is that if you experience something, which is the application of like trying something, right? And you repeat that thing that you've just experienced, it'll evolve into a habit. When you repeat that habit, it will evolve into a behavior. And then when you repeat that behavior, it will become your culture. Your culture as an individual, okay? We all have our individual cultures. It's not about a nation or a community in this particular case. It's about your individual culture that people can identify you through. When we look at a community at large, the things that identify their culture, generally speaking, are going to be their clothing, their language, their food, their traditions, and sometimes their spirituality. Okay, but you as an individual, it's the same sort of thing with a different mix, cocktail mix, if you will, right? So you have your your integrity, you have your reliability, you have your honesty, your trustworthiness, your actions. And I love what Nkechi said about being active, right? Think of the two words human being. Human is a noun, right? Being is what? It's a verb. A verb is an action word. So if we're not active as humans, we're not being human, but we're supposed to be human beings. So let's recognize that and activate it, right? Again, same root, act, act, act. Okay, you have to be an activist in your own quest to be an influencer. So you have to apply things, you have to apply them repeatedly until they become normal for you. Because if you're apprehensive or you perceive yourself to be an introvert or shy, then that challenge is only going to come about by trying. If you believe that having a measure of influence is going to bring benefit to you and those that you care about. So it's really essential that we look at this from the standpoint of personal betterment. And then results are going to lead to one of the best aspects of influence is endorsements. That's what networking is. When somebody says, I'm not sure, but my friend Uju, she knows. She's done this, 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 and this. You've endorsed someone else, right? And the reason you're endorsing those other people is because they've brought results to the table, right? So that's where your confidence from the external standpoint, people find confidence in you or buy into you or rely on you or seek you out to assist them based on the results that they're aware of and that you continually demonstrate. And they become ambassadors for you, which is also a synonym for being an endorsement for you, of you. Now, obviously, there are negative uses of influence, and on one hand, you can look at the impact of negative influence on the psyche, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, right? If somebody has a measure of influence over someone and uses it to the negative, right? And especially if it's mixed in with malintended power, that's when you're going to get, if you follow the Me Too movement, right? You saw people being identified all across, whether it be Hollywood or the sports industry or whatever it may be, publishing, you name it. These were people who were using their influence and their power in a negative context. And they were impacting people, as I said, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, right? So we're not endorsing, obviously, 1% of that or 1% of 1%. So amassing influence, it has to be based on those attributes. And that's kind of your formula. You check in with yourself and determine, as I'm saying these words, how are they resonating in your heart as it relates to you? And I'll say them one more time: integrity, reliability, honesty, trustworthiness, actions, work ethic, consistency, results, professionalism. All of those things should resonate with you, and you know where you are in that whole realm of being qualified, if you will, as an influencer. One of the often overlooked aspects of amassing influence is just knowing yourself and letting others know who you are. Again, this touched on some of the networking advice we received. You have to be in love with yourself in a holistic, organic, realistic kind of way. If you don't love yourself, it's going to wear on your forehead. People will be able to read it, right? Because they'll see the discomfort with who you are. But what you want to do is make sure that you're so in love with yourself that you want to share more of yourself with the world in terms of your intellectual capacity, your empathy, your guidance, your support, and so that people can, again, lean on you for the things that they're in need of, or if they see benefit in having known you, okay? You've got to be ecstatic about who you are. And if you're not ecstatic about who you are, you've got to recognize by looking inside yourself and determining what is inside of you that's holding you back. The courage that's required to do that is essential so that you can be objective, because there's only one person on this planet you cannot lie to, and that's yourself. Like I tell people all the time, I don't have bad days. And the reason I don't have bad days is I wake up and recognize who I am, what I am, why I am, how I am, where I am. All of these things. And I'm the same person every day because of that, because I recognize that. So if I without any has nothing to do with conceit or narcissism, whatever people might think. This is about a genuine aspect of love for oneself. You talk about confidence, none of the attributes we've talked about, specifically confidence, are going to come about if you don't enjoy who you are. Critical to your existence. Now, I demonstrate, I can't remember the name of the movie, but I adopted the term my farliness, right? How farly can I be on a given day, any given day, whether I'm interacting with my children, my ex, my present, doesn't matter. Like, how farly am I going to be? How farly am I, how much on target am I, with my farliness? And if I'm off target, I have to understand why. And if I don't know what my farliness is, I have to discover what it is, where it is, how it is, why it is. Therefore, the expectations I have and listen to this very closely. If the expectations you have of yourself are in line with the expectations people have of you, you know you're on target. That, my friends, is influence. Think about that. If the expectations you have of yourself are in line with the expectations people have of you, that is the actual definition of influence, because they're going to come to you based on those expectations. And if those expectations that they're hoping to benefit or receive from you in terms of the standard of excellence, the reliability, and all the attributes we talked about, and you know you possess those to the highest possible degree, it's smooth sailing from there. And as I said earlier, let's not misconstrue. Influence and power are not the same thing. Power is the ability to, overrule, and influence is the ability to shape the desired outcome. You guys get the difference? So power is the ability to overrule. Influence is the ability to shape the desired outcome. In Israel, but as mentioned, I do work in education. And I remember when I went to Israel the first time and we visited some of their public schools. And in Israel, if you're a grade 3 teacher, they don't promote you to eventually become a vice principal or a principal. They just pay you more because they recognize that your measure of influence at that particular stage of a child's learning is the highest, is impactful, more so than if you taught grade 4s, grade 7s, or became a vice principal or principal. Think about that structure. So that joy that you exude as an educator and that brings about the joy of learning in a child is best applied and identifiably applied at a particular stage of the academic journey. So they say, no need to promote you. You will be promoted financially. Okay, totally different thought process. So over here, generally speaking, a high school educator, teacher, cannot make more than a vice principal based on how high you get in your category of your job description. But it doesn't work that way everywhere in the world, right? Because they recognize in Germany, Israel, a few other countries, that the educator that's working with the young people is is equally as valuable or has greater value than those who operate the school from an administrative level. Another aspect that I wanted to share was, I talked about, influence and networking being cousins. You think of the old adage, for instance, birds of a feather flock together. We've all heard that before, right? So you have to be a little bit discerning, right? With how you identify with a particular group of people, right? It's okay to be in one circle or more, but there has to be an exit door. Right? And that exit door doesn't mean you don't come back in. It means there are times when you have to be able to measure, right? Because you don't want your circle of influence or your amassing of influence to be impacted by those you're associating with in some sort of predominant, imbalanced kind of way, because perspectives are always out there. If you have the capacity to move in different circles and sustain your influence in each of those circles collectively and individually, then that's going to obviously deepen and be more impactful in terms of the influence you have over how you shape outcomes, desirable outcomes that everyone can appreciate. right? It's not as complicated as it sounds. It's just about you when you apply your integrity. If you're in a circle of people and somebody makes an errant comment, you know, a lot of times right now in black with anti-black racism, white people are asking, how can I be an ally? Right? One of the fundamental demonstrations of allyship is, how are you curbing the negative behaviors in your social circle? Like you're at your family barbecue and you've got this uncle who's using derogatory terms about different ethnicities. It's, oh, that's just Uncle Bob. He's always been like that. No, you've got to have the gumption, if you claim to be an ally, to step up and say, you know, Uncle Bob, right? That's not, that language and that terminology is not welcome here. You understand? So same thing with influence, right? You cannot, you know, you melt into circumstances and not stand out based on your integrity, your perspectives, and the wholehearted presence that you actually are supposed to have in every circle of influence. And that's when you demonstrate, you know, the measure of influence that you actually are claiming or would like to have or like to demonstrate. You know, so we talked about same thing, birds of a feather. Then you have association, breeding, assimilation. People are going to perceive you based on the influence of the circles that you move within and how much you influence those circles, right? We work with, in some of the work I do, we work with some of the hardest to reach youth, right? We have to have some measure of influence, right? As opposed to just assimilating into the circumstance that they found themselves in. That's where the measure of difference is going to happen. So you need that exit strategy. You need to be able to be objective and recognize when it doesn't sit well with you and not hide from that. Embrace that, understand it, apply yourself and say, I woke up today as Farley. I'm going to bed tonight as Farley. And I loved every minute in between about the Farliness that I demonstrated to whomever I encountered. Make sense? Okay, you know me, Uju, I'll talk forever. So how am I for time?
You kind of have 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes left?
3 minutes, 3.
Oh,
but we want questions because everyone will be asking questions.
Yes, yes. I'd love to feel questions.
So, yes.
Okay, we do have Dion has had her hand up for a bit. So Dion, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is as it relates to trauma, okay? So it's gonna be vulnerable with everybody here. You know, I grew up in a household where there was a lot of abuse. I grew up in a household where, you know, a lot of my Dionness was not acceptable behavior under any circumstances. And it wasn't until I was in my probably mid to late 20s that I started to sever those relationships with my toxic family members and really start to try and heal myself from growing up in that way, okay? Now, during this time, I was successful. Like I put myself through university, I climbed a corporate ladder, I've run businesses that are being carried around the world. You know what I mean? It's not like I haven't had that level of success in my life, but I think the way that I was raised, the way that I grew up to believe about myself has me in this perpetual state of disbelief, okay? Gotcha. So it's like people will tell me all the time, oh, you're so accomplished, you've done this, you should have confidence in this, look at all these things you've achieved, look at, you know, the socioeconomic brackets that you've jumped and all these things. And to me, that's just surviving. That's not, those aren't things that I'm like, oh yay, look at me, what I did, right? Like I'm not patting myself on the back for these things. I'm just trying to thrive in my life despite where I came from. And so I think as my persona, this is something I carry around with me, you know what I mean? And I've gone to therapy, I've read all the books, I've done a lot of work, I do a lot of soul searching, I'm continuing to educate myself on a consistent basis, but I don't see this particular part of me really cracking open and changing. Like this is probably the most vulnerable I've been comfortable being in my entire existence, right? To get on a call with people who I don't know and say, this is my experience, you know what I mean? And this is what I'm struggling with right now. But even then, I still kind of feel like, you know, I'm carrying this energy that translates to a certain kind of confidence. Like people, when they meet me, they feel like I'm someone to be reckoned with in a sense, you know what I mean? It's less that like I'm not bringing this energy that's like light and fun and confident. I'm
Mhm.
bringing this energy that's like, I know what I'm doing. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Okay. So, I mean, I heard a few things that I can comment on. You didn't ask a specific question, but what I would say to you is that number one, you're not your story. Number one, you are not your story. If you, based on what you've shared with us, you've broken the tie, which takes an incredible amount of fortitude, confidence, all the great words that we can apply to that. But here's the key, sister. Success is not titles. Success is happiness, right? And if you can amass all sorts of wealth and quote unquote influence on from an external standpoint, right? But internally, you have to find your what's called your joy quotient, your JQ. What is your joy quotient? What, you know, and when we talk about it, otherwise it's a bit of a shell, right? And you have to fall in love with yourself, Dion. You have to fall in love with yourself, right? So that the choices you're making are influenced not by your head only, but also by your heart, right? Because the cerebral application of knowledge and influence, all these things is all good on the external. But if you're not exuding joy, I tell people all the time, you look at a guy like, and I could say because he's a public figure that we all know, Harvey Weinstein, right? When you look back at Harvey Weinstein at 13, 14 years old, he couldn't get a date to the grade 8 prom, right? He's watching the football players go down the hall in, I think it was in California, wherever it was, and they've got a girl on each arm, and he's looking at all this sort of social stuff that he can't identify with, right? Because he was a very good academic student, he became a lawyer, all that wonderful stuff, but he had no joy in his heart. So the minute you give somebody who's insecure power, you're gonna have problems. And that ranges from an insecure police officer, to an insecure CEO, to an insecure president. And you'll see those manifestations. So I implore you to find the love within you. That will change. And quite honestly, that's gonna blow up you on the business side too, by the way. So you may have achieved all sorts of things. When you start to love yourselves and love yourself and apply the love with the business acumen, it's like watch out world. So whatever it takes to figure that out, here's the thing, what I like about this. What you've done is you figured what was not working and you broke the tie. So full 100% kudos for that, right? It's the hardest thing to do. There's something called adverse childhood experience syndrome, right? Young people who have experienced these various traumas in their life, separation, abuse, all these different things. And to break out of that is a monstrous ask. And you've managed to do it. I don't know the extent of your history, but it doesn't matter to me because you're not your history.
No.
You can be aware of it.
History, though.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'll tell you. I said no, I'm not my history, but it is a bad history though.
Exactly. I mean, and you're aware of it. You're aware of it, which means being aware of it allows you to avoid it. If you weren't aware of it, you would perpetuate it. We hear these stories all the time of people who go back in the same kinds of relationships over and over and over. Why would she go back with him, a guy like that? Her last guy was like that. The guy before was like that. Like why? It's because they're not aware of the impact you've broken it, right? So I would just encourage you, it's all about love, self-love. Self-love, self-love, self-love. I could say it 1,000 times in a row for you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Dion, for just being vulnerable. And often the chats, you have a fan base growing and everyone's just cheering you on and just really applauding you for sharing of yourself. And thank you, Farley, for really helping to shed some light and just encourage one of our own. Thank you so much. I have another question that came to me, and because we're kind of over time, this will be the last question. So this is around, networks, or rather influence, and also your network. So the question is, how do you then handle when a member of your network has a bad reputation or did something that tainted his reputation, and then it has to affect your influence and credibility. And this question kind of just reminded me of the Me Too moment, where there were some men who fell into that, and some of their people in their network had to, struggle between either supporting in one way, supporting them and not the action, or just denouncing that network. So how do you handle that?
Well, I'll begin by sharing that most people don't know this, but Albert Einstein was a huge advocate for equality and was an advocate for Black people. A lot of people don't know that. And my favorite quote from Albert Einstein, and it's great because I liked the quote before I knew he was a social activist for Black people. So I'm justified in it being one of my favorite quotes now, from a Black male perspective. But he said that the greatest evil is not what we as human beings do. The greatest evil is those who stand by and watch it being done. Mm-hmm. Right? So when you now, and the other thing I want to clarify is your network's not just the people you know and connected to, right? When you define your network, these are the people that you identify, right, in the moment as being part of so there's the network in terms of, and the internet's really sort of really made things vague, right? So network, okay, how many people do I have on my LinkedIn? 587. Oh, that might have a network of 500. That's not your network, right? Your network, beyond being your net worth, is also the people that you are truly connected to in the human context. Right? So if somebody exhibits errant behavior or bad sense of judgment or any whatever the circumstance could be, you have to have the confidence to detach yourself. Right? I'll give you guys an example. It's not particularly a networking example, but it's an example of when you do you and you're so comfortable with yourself to do you. I was going to the Juno Awards in Saskatchewan, it was minus 42 degrees, right? Just to give you some context, in Saskatchewan. And I was in a limousine. I had my luggage. I was shooting Canadian Idol, but also attending the Junos. So I said to the driver, oh, tell me about the circumstance. How are Indigenous people doing in the province now? Because I'd been there before and so forth. And he went on to speak in derogatory context in ways that in a matter of 30, 45 seconds. So I said, excuse me, do me a favor, stop the vehicle, please. And we were on a main road. We were still another 20, 25 minutes minimum from where I was going. And I said, can you stop the vehicle, please, and open the trunk? And he said, what? Excuse me? It's 42 degrees, minus 42 out there. What are you doing? I said, you know what? I'm not going to subject myself to the kinds of perspective you seem comfortable sharing. And I will be notifying your superiors as to why I exited your vehicle. So I got my stuff from in the car, I got my stuff from the trunk, and I hailed a taxi, as cold as I was. But if I stayed in that vehicle and pretended it didn't matter because I needed to be in a vehicle to get to my hotel, right? And allowed him to continue that derogatory language and perspective about Indigenous, because here's the thing, and it's not about what he might say to someone else about Black people, it's about, I care about people. You understand? You have to be able to detach yourself the way Dion did. Detach yourself. That's the most self-full thing you can do. You have to be full of who you are in a positive context, right? And have the courage and the discipline to say no. Say, if somebody's in your network, do not you let them know why they're no longer going to be. Because you don't want to wear the same badge that they're wearing so that you are now perceived, as I said, association breeds assimilation, right? Birds of a feather flock together. So if you're with that person and you're laughing and giggling and you know that they're not representing your standards, your ethics, your integrity, et cetera, then you're basically saying it's okay. And we all know it's not. So that would be my advice. You again, I'm an entrepreneur, so I can't really be fired. But if it's somebody you perceive as your boss, and if you say this, you might get fired. Then I've left lots of companies, in the quote unquote dust, right? Because the measures of integrity and so forth weren't where I thought they should be.
Thank you so much for shedding light on that. It's been a pleasure really having you on. I know that the time is spent, but thank you so much for really just coming on and just sharing of yourself. It has been impactful, just, answering our questions and sharing lots and lots of insight on power versus influence, and understanding which we should really be building and which we should be careful how we manage and how we build, especially with our network. So thank you so much,
No,
Farley.
thank you.
Look forward to having you another time.
All right.
Thank you so much, ladies, for hanging in with us. It has been a pleasure as usual. Every week, it's always a pleasure hanging out and learning and just asking questions and learning again with every single one of you. Next week, we have another interesting session. I believe next week is a wellness session. So if I were you, I would invite other people as well to come in, because in as much as we want the work of our hand to really prosper and want to learn, have resources and tools to prosper our business, we also want to be sure that we are fine and we are taking steps to really take care of ourselves, especially in a month like International Women's Month and going forward. So thank you so much, ladies. Nadine, do you want to give the final words?
Absolutely. So thank you, Farley, for being here. And of course, Nkiche, who's not here, we'll have to thank her as well, Uju as well. And to each and every one of you women, it's such an honor and a privilege for me to share our stories each and every week, to build, grow together. I know that, the future is going to be very bright with dynamic women like yourselves. And, I cannot state enough the importance of sisterhood, allyship, friendship, mentorship, all of these relationships that we're forging through this program. I'm really thankful to our sponsors, Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub and TJ Maxx, for supporting the resources, and of course the BBPA. We believe in the power of strong Black women. We believe in us leading, growing, and building. And we want to do that more and more together. It's International Women's Month. Next week, we're actually having our immediate past president, Pauline Christian, on, and she's a dynamic woman, an absolutely dynamic woman. So please join us, and we'll have a few giveaways as well. So I look forward to see you guys next week, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you once again for choosing to share your time with us. Merci.